"I'm not a servant," Bride said. Mafia boss whispered. "Then be my wife starting tonight." The marble floors of the Villa Borghese were not designed for comfort. They were designed to shine, to reflect the crystal chandeliers hanging 20 feet above and to echo the sharp clicks of designer heels. For Alina Ventura, however, the floor was simply an enemy that had been assaulting the soles of her feet for 14 straight hours. It was 2 a.m. The engagement party for the daughter of the Ricci crime family was finally winding down, dissolving from a structured dinner into a chaotic sprawl of drunk elites and cigar smoke. Alina adjusted the collar of her stiff black uniform. She was 25 years old, with dark curls pulled back so tightly it made her temples throb, and she was exhausted. She moved through the crowd like a ghost. That was the first rule of high-end service. Be invisible until you are needed. Do not make eye contact. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not exist as a person. Alina hated that rule. She carried a heavy silver tray loaded with empty champagne flutes, her arms trembling slightly from the strain. Around her, the air smelled of expensive perfume, roasted lamb and the metallic tang of old money. These people were not just rich, they were powerful in a way that made the local police look the other way. Everyone knew who the Ricci's were. Everyone knew who their guests were. And everyone knew that the staff were disposable. A woman in a red silk dress laughed shrilly, throwing her head back and nearly knocking the tray from Alina's hands. Alina sidestepped gracefully, a maneuver learned from years of waitressing to pay off debts that were not hers. "Watching it," the woman snapped, not even looking at Alina's face. She just gestured vaguely with a diamond-clad hand. "I apologize." "Ma'am?" Alina murmured, her voice steady despite the grit in her throat. She continued toward the kitchen, weaving through the throng of men in tuxedos who stood in tight circles, speaking in hushed, serious tones. She knew better than to listen. In this town, hearing the wrong thing could get your apartment burned down. Alina just wanted to go home. She wanted to take off these shoes, soak her feet in ice water, and forget that her rent was 3 weeks late and her landlord, Mr. Russo, was threatening to put her belongings on the sidewalk. She needed the overtime pay from tonight. She needed it desperately. As she neared the service doors, the crowd shifted. A group of men moved abruptly. Blocking her path, Alina paused, waiting for an opening. She caught a glimpse of the man at the center of the circle. He was taller than the others, with broad shoulders that strained the fabric of a suit that likely cost more than Alina made in a year. He was not speaking. He was listening, his head tilted slightly, holding a glass of red wine with long, elegant fingers. Suddenly, a drunken guest stumbled backward, shoving Alina hard from behind. The tray tipped. Alina lurched forward, fighting for balance, but physics was unforgiving. The silver tray clattered loudly against the marble, shattering the crystal flutes. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the glass of red wine in her own hand, a half-empty glass she had cleared from a table, which launched forward and splashed directly onto the chest of the tall man in the center of the circle. The music seemed to stop. The chatter died instantly. Alina froze. The dark crimson stain bloomed rapidly across the man's crisp white dress shirt, soaking into the lapel of his charcoal jacket. It looked like a gunshot wound. The man did not flinch. He did not jump back or shout. He simply looked down at the stain, then slowly raised his eyes to meet hers. His eyes were terrifying. They were the color of espresso, dark and unreadable. Framed by thick lashes, his face was hard angles and shadows, handsome in a way that felt dangerous, like a weapon polished to a shine. "You clumsy little idiot!" The drunken guest who had pushed her slurred, trying to deflect blame. "Look what you did to Mr. Renzetti. Renzetti." The blood drained from Alina's face. Damiano Renzetti, the head of the Renzetti family, the man who controlled the docks, the unions, and half the real estate in New Jersey. She had just thrown wine on the most dangerous man in the state. The drunken guest grabbed Alina's arm, his grip bruising. "You stupid girl. You are going to pay for that suit. Do you know how much that costs? You are nothing but an incompetent servant. Something inside. Alina snapped. It was the exhaustion. It was the weeks of double shifts. It was the landlord banging on her door at 6 in the morning. It was the way these people looked through her as if she were furniture. She ripped her arm away from the drunk guest. "I am not a servant," Alina said. Her voice was not loud, but in the terrified silence of the ballroom, it carried like a bell. The room gasped. "You did not talk back. Not here. Not to these people." Alina straightened her spine, ignoring the trembling in her hands. She looked past the drunk man and looked directly at Damiano Renzetti. She expected anger. She expected him to snap his fingers and have security drag her out into the alley. "I was pushed," she stated firmly, locking eyes with the Don, "and I am not a servant. I am a human being working a job, and I deserve basic respect." The drunk guest looked ready to strike her. Damiano Renzetti raised one hand. The motion was slight, barely a flick of the wrist, but the drunk man froze instantly. The silence in the room deepened, becoming heavy and suffocating. Damiano took a step forward. He ignored the wine soaking into his shirt. He stepped over the broken glass, the crunching sound echoing in the quiet hall. He stopped inches from Alina. He smelled of sandalwood, expensive tobacco, and the metallic scent of the wine she had spilled. He towered over her, forcing her to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Alina refused to look away, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Damiano studied her. His gaze traveled over her defiant face, noting the flush of anger on her cheeks, the spark of rebellion in her eyes, and the proud set of her jaw. Most people trembled when he looked at them. Most people begged for forgiveness. She was doing neither. A slow, lazy smirk curved the corner of his mouth. It did not reach his eyes, but it changed the energy in the room from terrified to electric. "Not a servant," Damiano repeated, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that seemed to vibrate in the floorboards. "No," Alina said. Her chin held high. Damiano huffed a short, dark laugh. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a silk handkerchief, and dabbed at the stain on his chest without breaking eye contact. "Get back to work," he said softly. He turned his back on her and walked away, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. Alina stood there, stunned, as the ambient noise of the party slowly returned, though everyone kept stealing glances at the waitress, who had just insulted the boss and lived. 2 hours later, Alina was in the back alley by the loading docks, hauling a bag of trash into the dumpster. The cool night air felt good against her flushed skin. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline had worn off. She knew she was going to be fired. The agency would never keep her after a scene like that. Miss Ventura... Alina spun around. A man in a dark suit stood by the rear exit. He was not a waiter. He was security, one of Renzetti's men. "Mr. Renzetti requests a word," the man said. It was not a question. Alina felt a cold knot of dread tighten in her stomach. This was it. He hadn't made a scene in public because he was a professional. He had waited until she was alone to punish her. She considered running, but she knew she wouldn't make it 10 feet. She followed the man back inside, through the bustling kitchen, down a quiet corridor lined with velvet wallpaper, and into the villa's private library. The room was dimly lit, smelling of old paper and leather. Damiano Renzetti was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, his jacket discarded on a chair. He had unbuttoned the top of his wine-stained shirt, revealing tanned skin and the hint of a tattoo near his collarbone. He did not look up when she entered. He was reading a file. "Close the door," he said. Alina closed it. She stood in the center of the room, clasping her hands in front of her to hide their trembling. "Am I fired?" she asked. She wanted to sound brave, but her voice cracked. Damiano looked up. In the dim light, his eyes were even darker, intelligent and predatory. He closed the file. Alina saw her own name typed on the tab. "Fired?" Damiano asked, leaning back in his leather chair. "From the catering agency?" "Yes. I made the call 10 minutes ago." Alina felt the floor drop out from under her. "I need that job." "You need money," Damiano corrected. "I saw your file. Foster care until 18, no degree. Debt from a former partner who ran off and left you with the bills. The current address is a basement apartment in a building that should have been condemned 5 years ago. Alina's face burned with humiliation. You have no right to investigate me. I have every right to know who attacks me at a dinner party, Damiano said smoothly. It was an accident, and I didn't attack you. Damiano stood up. He moved around the desk with a fluid, lethal grace. He stopped in front of her, leaning against the edge of the desk, crossing his arms over his chest. You interest me, Alina Ventura. You were terrified out there. I could see your pulse in your neck, and yet you stood your ground. You looked me in the eye. My own captain struggled to do that. Alina said nothing. She just wanted to leave. I have a proposition, Damiano said. I don't want your money. Alina snapped. I haven't offered it yet. Damiano's smirk returned, faint and ghostly. I need a housekeeper. Someone to live at my estate, manage the staff, distinct. Organize my schedule, cook. Alina blinked. You want me to be your maid? After I just told you I am not a servant? Damiano tilted his head. It pays $10,000 a month, plus room and board. Alina's breath caught. $10,000. That would clear her debt in 3 months. It would get her away from Mr. Russo. It was a lifeline. But she looked at him, at the arrogance in his posture, the way he looked at her like she was a commodity he could simply purchase. No, she said. Damiano's eyebrows rose. No? I am not going to be your live-in maid, living under your roof, at your beck and call. I know who you are. Mr. Renzetti. I know what kind of men you employ. I want a normal life. I want my freedom. I don't want to be owned. Damiano pushed off the desk and took a step closer. The air between them seemed to heat up, charged with a strange, confusing tension. You think you are free now? He asked quietly. You are a slave to your debt. You are a slave to a landlord who watches you when you come home. You are a slave to a catering company that pays you minimum wage to be treated like garbage. Alina took a step back, hitting the door. Stay away from me. Damiano stopped. He didn't chase her. He just watched her with that intense, unblinking gaze. You will change your mind, he said calmly. I won't. You will. Because I don't actually need a servant. Alina. He paused, his eyes dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to her gaze. I need a wife. Alina stared at him, sure she had misheard, but his expression was deadly serious. She turned around, fumbled with the doorknob, and fled. She ran down the corridor, out the service entrance, and into the cool night, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Her apartment was freezing. The radiator clanked and hissed, but produced no heat. Alina sat on the edge of her sagging mattress, still in her uniform, her head in her hands. The encounter with Damiano felt like a fever dream. A wife? It was insane. He was mocking her, playing with her like a cat plays with a mouse before breaking its neck. A heavy fist pounded on her door. Ventura, open up! Alina jumped. It was Russo, her landlord. She walked to the door but didn't open it. It's 3 a.m. Mr. Russo, go away. I know you're in there. You're late on the rent again. I'm sick of your excuses. You have until noon tomorrow or I'm changing the locks. And maybe I'll keep some of your things as payment, huh? You have some nice jewelry? Alina leaned her forehead against the peeling paint of the door, tears stinging her eyes. She didn't have jewelry. She didn't have anything. She thought of Damiano's offer. $10,000 a month. Safety, warmth. No, she wouldn't sell her soul to a gangster. She was better than that. She was strong. She will find another job tomorrow. But no one was hiring. Over the next 3 days, Alina went to 5 interviews. Every single one went well until they ran her background check or called her previous employer. Then, the mood shifted. Sorry. The position has been filled. We went in a different direction. She was being blackballed. She knew it. And then strange things started happening. On Tuesday, she came home to find her apartment door unlocked. Panic seized her. She pushed it open, expecting to find Russo inside, or her things thrown on the street. Instead, the apartment was empty. But the lock, the flimsy deadbolt that had been broken for 6 months, was gone. In its place was a heavy-duty, high-security steel lock the kind they used on bank vaults. On the kitchen counter sat 2 bags of high-end groceries, fresh fruit, steaks, expensive coffee, things she hadn't been able to afford in years. There was no note. Alina rushed to the window. Down on the street, a black sedan with tinted windows was idling. As soon as she looked out, it pulled away slowly. She marched down to the superintendent's office to confront Russo. She found him sitting on his stoop, looking pale and shaken. He had a black eye that was swelling shut. "Mister? Russo?" Alina asked. "Did you fix my lock?" Russo flinched when he saw her. He held up his hands, terrified. "I didn't do anything. Miss Ventura, everything is fine. You take your time with the rent. No rush. Just... please. Tell your friends I'm a good guy. Okay? I'm a good guy." He scrambled inside and locked his door. Alina stood on the sidewalk, the wind whipping her hair across her face. It was Damiano. He was fixing her life without her permission. He was showing her how easy it was for him to solve her problems. It was manipulative. It was controlling. It was the most protected she had felt in her entire life. And that terrified her more than the threat. By the weekend, Alina had managed to secure a single shift with a different agency, one that was desperate for bodies. It was another high society event, a charity gala at a museum downtown. She walked in with her head down, praying she wouldn't run into him. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. The name on the donor wall above the main stage read, "The Renzetti Foundation." Alina tried to hide in the kitchen, scrubbing pots that didn't need scrubbing. She felt a prickle on the back of her neck, a sensation of being watched. She turned around. The kitchen was busy, chefs shouting orders, waiters running back and forth. But standing near the entrance to the walk-in freezer, leaning against the stainless steel counter with deceptive casualness, was Damiano. He was wearing a tuxedo tonight, black tie, impeccable. He looked like a prince of darkness amidst the chaos of the kitchen. He caught her eye and tilted his head toward the freezer. Alina wiped her hands on her apron. She should ignore him. She should walk out, but her feet moved on their own, drawn by the magnetic pull he seemed to exert on the air around him. She stopped 3 feet away from him. "You got me fired," she accused, her voice a low hiss. "I opened up your schedule," Damiano corrected. "You terrorized my landlord. I ensured your safety. The man is a parasite." Alina crossed her arms. "I didn't ask for your help. I don't want your charity. And I definitely don't want to be your housekeeper." Damiano pushed off the counter. He moved into her personal space, forcing her to back up until her shoulders hit the cold metal door of the freezer. He placed one hand on the door beside her head, boxing her in. He was close, too close. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I told you," he said, his voice dropping to a murmur that was meant only for her. "I don't want a housekeeper." Alina's breath hitched. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. She looked up at him, trying to find the cruelty she knew must be there, but all she saw was a terrifying intensity, a hunger. "Then what do you want?" she whispered. Damiano leaned down. His lips brushed against the shell of her ear, sending a shiver straight down her spine. His scent enveloped her, danger and desire wrapped in silk. "You said you are not a servant," he whispered, his warm breath ghosting over her sensitive skin. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his face inches from hers. "Then be my wife." Alina opened her mouth to argue, to scream, to run, but no sound came out. The air in the kitchen seemed to vanish, leaving only the two of them, locked in a silent battle of wills that felt dangerously like the beginning of a surrender. The image of his eyes haunted her. Alina Ventura prided herself on her discipline. She'd survived the foster system, survived poverty, and survived men who thought a pretty face was an invitation to take what they wanted. She'd built a fortress around her mind, a place where logic and survival instinct ruled. But for the last 3 days, Damiano Renzetti had been sieging that fortress without even being in the room. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the ghost of his breath against her ear. "Then be my wife." It was absurd. It was a power play. It was the arrogance of a man who had never been told no. And yet, at night, when the wind rattled the loose window pane of her apartment, she found herself wondering what it would feel like to be safe. Not just safe, but protected by a force that made the rest of the world tremble. She hated herself for the thought. She hated that her body betrayed her, flushing with heat whenever the memory of his proximity resurfaced. Alina was currently working a temporary shift at a high-end boutique in the city center, a job she had scraped together after the catering agency blacklisted her. It was dull work, folding cashmere sweaters and smiling at women who spent more on a handbag than Alina spent on rent in a year. At 5 o'clock, she clocked out and exited the rear staff door. The alley was usually empty. Today, it was occupied by a sleek black luxury sedan that looked like a shark swimming in shallow water. A man in a dark suit stood by the rear door. He was built like a tank, with a scar running through his eyebrow. "Miss Ventura," the man said. His voice was respectful but firm. "Mr. Renzetti instructed me to ensure you get home safely." Alina stopped, her grip tightening on her purse. "I take the bus. The bus is not safe," the driver said, opening the rear door. "Please, it is beginning to rain." Alina looked past him. 2 of her co-workers were coming out of the door. They stopped, staring at the car, then at Alina. She saw the look they exchanged, the raised eyebrows, the knowing smirks. "So that is how she affords the shoes," one whispered, loud enough for Alina to hear. "I heard she is his mistress." The other giggled. "I guess morals do not matter when you are that rich." Shame burned hot and bright in Alina's chest. She marched up to the driver. "Tell your boss to leave me alone," she hissed. "I am not a pet. I am not his property. And I am certainly not his mistress." The driver did not blink. "I am just the driver, Miss Ventura. But if you do not get in, he said he would come pick you up himself. And he attracts much more attention than I do." Alina looked at the smirking co-workers, then at the open car door. If Damiano came here, it would be a spectacle. She ground her teeth, ducked her head, and slid into the leather interior. As the car pulled away, she sat stiffly in the center of the seat, refusing to lean back. This was a game to him. He was isolating her, marking his territory until she had no choice but to run to him. "Take me to him," Alina said. The driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror. "He is at the club. Ma'am, the Emerald Room. Take me there. Now." The Emerald Room was a fortress of velvet and shadows, an exclusive members-only club that smelled of aged whiskey and secrets. Alina stormed past the bouncers, who stepped aside as if they had been expecting her. She found him in his private office on the top floor. The room was dimly lit, dominated by a panoramic view of the rain-slicked city. Damiano was standing by the window, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He did not turn around when she burst in. "You are ruining my life," Alina shouted. The door slammed shut behind her, sealing them in. Damiano turned slowly. He looked tired, though the lethality in his posture remained. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes tracking her movement across the room. "I am keeping you alive," he said calmly. Alina threw her purse onto a leather armchair. "By making everyone think I am your whore? My coworkers are laughing at me. No one will hire me for a real job because they are terrified of you. You are suffocating me." "Damiano, I am protecting what is mine," he replied, his voice dropping an octave. "I am not yours," Alina screamed, closing the distance between them. She wanted to hit him. She wanted to shake that infuriating calm off his face. "You don't know me. You don't own me. You are just a rich criminal who thinks he can buy a wife because he is too broken to find one the real way." The air in the room seemed to vanish in 2 strides. Damiano was in front of her. He did not grab her. He did not strike her. He simply loomed, his presence overwhelming, forcing her to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. The anger in his eyes was a dark, swirling storm. "You think I want to buy you?" he growled, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. "You think this is about possession?" "Yes," she shouted back, breathless. Damiano set his glass down on the desk with a sharp clack. He reached out, his hands hovering near her waist but not touching, as if he were afraid he might burn her. "If I wanted to own you, Alina, you would already be in my bed. I have the power to take whatever I want in this city. But I have not touched you. I have not forced you. I have waited. Then stop waiting, she challenged, her adrenaline spiking. Stop hovering. Stop ruining my reputation. Just leave me alone. I can't, he whispered. The confession hung between them, raw and terrified. Alina stared at him, her chest heaving. The anger was still there, but beneath it, something else was breaking through, a desperate, clawing hunger that she had been suppressing for weeks. Damiano looked at her mouth. The restraint in his body was palpable. His muscles were coiled tight. A predator, fighting against his own instinct. You drive me insane, he murmured. Then he moved. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision. His hands tangled into her hair, tilting her head back, and his mouth crashed onto hers with a desperation that stole the breath from her lungs. Alina gasped, and he used the moment to deepen the kiss, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, tasting of whiskey and fire. For a second she stood rigid, her mind screaming at her to push him away, but her body had its own agenda. Her hands flew up, gripping the lapels of his jacket, pulling him closer. She kissed him back with all the frustration and rage that had been building inside her. It was a kiss of war. It was a kiss that said, I hate you, and I need you in the same breath. Damiano groaned low in his throat, the sound vibrating against her lips, and one of his hands slid down to the small of her back, pulling her flush against his hardness. The heat was unbearable. It was consuming. Alina felt her knees weaken, her entire world narrowing down to the taste of him, the strength of his arms, the scent of sandalwood and rain. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, Damiano pulled back. He was breathing hard, his pupils blown wide, his lips swollen. He stared down at her, looking almost horrified by his own lack of control. Alina stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. Her heart was beating so fast she felt dizzy. She looked at him, at the man she was supposed to despise, and realized with terrifying clarity that she wanted to do it again. She spun around, grabbed her purse, and ran. Damiano did not follow her this time. For 3 days, Alina did not leave her apartment. She called in sick to the boutique. She sat in the dark, staring at the wall, replaying the kiss over and over until the memory felt like a bruise. She was losing. She was losing the battle for her own independence. On the other side of the city, Damiano Renzetti was fighting a different kind of war. The boardroom of his headquarters was filled with smoke. His underboss, Silvio, slammed a file onto the table. The Antonellis are moving on the chaotic shipment at the docks, Silvio said, his voice grave. They are bribing the council members we spent 5 years cultivating. They smell blood. Damiano, they think you are distracted. I am not distracted, Damiano said, though he was staring out the window, watching the gray skyline. You are, Silvio countered. You are obsessed with the girl, and the Antonellis know it. They are looking for a weakness. A civilian is a weakness. Damiano turned, his eyes cold. Watch your tone, Silvio. I am your friend, Damiano. I am telling you the truth. You need to solidify your position. The Greco family has a daughter, Elena. It would be a strategic match. A marriage alliance would push the Antonellis back. No, Damiano said instantly. Think about the family, Silvio urged. I am thinking about my family, Damiano roared, slamming his hand on the table. I will not marry for politics. I will not bring a stranger into my house and trust her with my life just to secure a shipping route. It is not just a shipping route, it is war, Silvio shouted back. And if you do not secure your flank, the Antonellis will strike, and they will not be polite about it. Damiano straightened his jacket. Let them come. But if they touch what is mine, I will burn their entire lineage to the ground. Silvio shook his head. You are making a mistake, boss. The girl. She is a liability. Damiano walked to the door. She is not a liability. Silvio. She's the only real thing I have found in 10 years. Alina returned to work on Friday, needing the money. She kept her head down, ignoring the whispers. When she returned to her building that evening, the hallway smelled wrong. It smelled of stale tobacco and disturbed dust. She reached for her keys, but the door to her apartment was already ajar. Her heart stopped. She pushed the door open slowly. The apartment had been tossed. It wasn't a robbery, it was a desecration. Her mattress was slashed, her clothes were pulled from the closet and trampled on the floor. The few framed photos she had of her mother were smashed, the glass glistening on the linoleum. Alina stood in the center of the chaos, her hands trembling. They hadn't taken the cheap TV. They hadn't taken the cash in the jar. They just wanted her to know they had been there. A black car screeched to a halt outside. Car doors slammed. Seconds later, Damiano filled the doorway. He was flanked by 2 guards. His gun drawn, he swept the room with his eyes, his face turning into a mask of pure, icy rage when he saw the destruction. Clear the building. He ordered the guards. He holstered his weapon and stepped over a pile of torn books to reach Alina. He didn't touch her, but he shielded her body with his own, placing himself between her and the door. "Did they touch you?" he demanded, his voice tight. Alina shook her head, unable to speak. She felt cold, so incredibly cold. "Pack a bag," Damiano said. "You are coming with me." "No," Alina whispered. Damiano spun on her. "Look around you. Alina, they were here. The Antonellis. This is a message. Next time. They will not just slash your mattress. They will wait for you to be in it." "I am not going to your mansion," Alina said, her voice shaking but stubborn. "If I go with you, I admit that I belong to you. I will become a target forever." "You are already a target," Damiano shouted, "'cause I chose you. And I am not going to let you die because of your stubborn pride. It is not pride, it is my life," Alina yelled back, tears finally spilling over. "You bring chaos wherever you go. I was fine before I met you. I was poor, but I was safe." Damiano flinched as if she had slapped him. The anger drained out of his face, leaving behind a bleak, hollow expression that silenced Alina instantly. "You think I don't know that?" he asked quietly. He walked over to the ruined mattress and sat down on the edge, ignoring the stuffing spilling out. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect style. "I had a sister," he said. Alina froze. He had never spoken about his family. The rumors said he was an only child. "Julia," he continued, staring at the floor. "She was 19. I was 22. I thought I could keep her separate from this life. I thought if I just kept her away from the business, she would be safe." He paused, his jaw clenching. "I was wrong. Our enemies. They didn't care that she was innocent. They took her to get to my father. By the time we found where the trafficking ring was holding her," his voice broke. He took a shuddering breath, but he didn't cry. He looked too broken to cry. It was too late, he finished softly. "I swore on her grave that I would never let anyone I care about be that vulnerable again. I swore I would never trust anyone I couldn't protect with my own hands." He looked up at Alina. His eyes were wet, stripped of all their usual arrogance. "I am arrogant, Alina. I am controlling. I am a monster to half of this city. But I am terrified. Because when I look at you, I see the only thing in the world I cannot bear to lose." Alina felt the walls of her fortress crumbling. She saw the boy beneath the suit, the brother who had failed, the man who was trying to atone for a sin that wasn't his. She walked over to him. The floorboards creaked. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't agree to go to the mansion. "You can't move me," she said softly. "This is my home, even if it is broken." Damiano looked at her, panic rising in his eyes. "Alina," but she interrupted. "I don't want to be alone tonight." Damiano exhaled, a long, jagged sound. He stood up and began to give orders to his men outside to secure the perimeter, to stand guard at the street level and the hallway. He had the door fixed within the hour. When the apartment was quiet again, Damiano did not try to take her to bed. He did not try to kiss her. He took off his jacket and his shoulder holster, placing them on the dresser. He sat on the edge of the ruined mattress, his back to the window, watching the door. "Go to sleep, Alina," he said. "I will be right here." Alina lay down. She curled onto her side, facing him. He was still wearing his dress shirt and slacks, sitting rigid, like a statue carved from grief and vigilance. She watched him for a long time. The city lights filtered through the window, casting shadows across his sharp cheekbones. He looked exhausted. "Damiano," she whispered. He looked down at her. "Yes?" You can't protect anyone if you don't sleep. I don't need sleep." Alina reached out. Her hand found where it rested on his knee. His skin was warm, his fingers rough. She tugged gently. Damiano hesitated. He looked at the door, then at her hand, then at her eyes. The internal war raged behind his gaze, the need to be the sentry versus the desperate need for comfort. Slowly, stiffly, he shifted. He lifted his legs onto the bed. He did not get under the covers. He lay down on top of the quilt, fully clothed, lying on his back beside her. He kept a respectful distance, leaving a few inches of space between them. He stared up at the cracked ceiling. Alina shifted closer. She didn't hug him, but she pressed her side against his. She felt the tension in his frame slowly, very slowly, begin to unspool. Damiano turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. His grip was tight, desperate, an anchor in a storm. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. Alina didn't answer. She just squeezed his hand back, listening to the rhythm of his breathing until they both drifted into a fitful, shared silence, armed against the world by nothing but the warmth of each other's skin. Morning light did not flatter Alina's apartment. It exposed the water stains on the ceiling, the dust motes dancing in the drafty air, and the worn patches on the linoleum floor. But to Alina, waking up that Saturday felt different. For the first time in years, the apartment did not feel like a cage. It felt like a fortress. She woke up first, beside her. Damiano Renzetti was asleep. The feared Mafia Don, the man who made grown men tremble with a look, was lying on his back on her lumpy mattress, one arm thrown over his eyes to shield them from the sun. He was still fully clothed in yesterday's dress shirt and slacks, though the top buttons were undone and his feet were bare. Alina watched him for a long moment, her heart doing a strange, treacherous flip in her chest. Asleep, the harsh lines of his face smoothed out. He looked younger. Humans. She slid out of bed quietly, needing to do something with the nervous energy buzzing under her skin. She went to the kitchenette. Navigating the small space with practiced ease, she found the expensive groceries he had delivered: eggs, heavy cream, artisan bread, thick-cut bacon. She started to cook. 20 minutes later, the smell of frying bacon and brewing coffee filled the small room. Alina turned from the stove to find Damiano sitting up. He was watching her. His hair was rumpled, his eyes heavy with sleep but focused entirely on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Good morning," she said, setting a plate on the tiny, wobbling table. "It isn't much." "I don't have a dining room." Damiano stood and walked to the table. He looked at the scrambled eggs and toast as if she had presented him with a feast prepared by royalty. He sat down on the folding chair, his long legs cramping in the small space, and took a bite. He closed his eyes and groaned softly. "This is the best thing I have ever tasted." Alina leaned against the counter, crossing her arms to hide how pleased she felt. "It is just eggs. Damiano, don't lie." "I never lie," he said, looking at her seriously. "I have eaten in the finest restaurants in Rome, Paris, and New York. But this, you made this. For me. That makes it better." The sincerity in his voice was disarming. Alina looked down at her hands. It was hard to maintain her walls when he was sitting in her kitchen, eating off a chipped plate with such reverence. "We need to talk," she said softly. Damiano set his fork down. About why I am like this. Why I can't just accept your help." Damiano waited, giving her the space she needed. Alina took a deep breath. "My mother died when I was 6. I went into the system. Do you know what the foster system is like in this state? It is a business. They paid families to take me in, and most of them just wanted the check. I was free labor. I was a maid, a babysitter, a punching bag." She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. "When I was 17, I aged out. I thought I was free. Then I met a man. He was charming, older. He said he wanted to take care of me. I was stupid. I signed papers I shouldn't have signed. I took out loans in my name for his business ideas." She looked up at Damiano, her eyes dry and hard. "He disappeared 2 years ago, left me with $50,000 in debt and a landlord who knows him. That is why I work double shifts. That is why I don't sleep. I have been owned by the state, owned by debt, and owned by men who think they know better. I promised myself I would never belong to anyone ever again." Damiano listened in silence. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were clenched into fists on his knees. "Marry me," he said. Alina let out a short, bitter laugh. She shook her head, turning back to the sink to hide the sudden sting of tears. "You aren't listening. Damiano, I just told you I don't want to be owned, and your solution is to buy me a ring? It is not buying," Damiano said, his voice rough. "It is a partnership. I can wipe that debt with a phone call. I can give you the world." "Alina, I don't want the world," she snapped, spinning around. "I want my own life. I am not a prize at a carnival. Damiano, I am not something you win just because you are the strongest man in the room." She grabbed her purse. "I have a job interview at a bistro uptown. A real job. One I got on my own. Please be gone when I get back." She stormed out before he could answer, leaving him sitting alone at her tiny table. The interview at Le Jardin was going well. The manager, a stout man with a kind face, seemed impressed by her experience and her work ethic. Alina felt a spark of hope. This was a respectable place. Good tips, normal hours. Then, the manager's phone buzzed. He glanced at a text message, and his face went pale. He looked up at Alina, his demeanor changing instantly from warm to terrified. "I am sorry. Miss Ventura," he stammered, closing her file. "We cannot hire you." Alina blinked. "What? But you just said I was perfect for the role." We have just been informed," the manager said, sweating, "that hiring you would be complicated. We cannot have trouble here. We are a family establishment." "Trouble?" Alina asked, her voice rising. "What are you talking about?" The manager lowered his voice. "Everyone knows you are with Renzetti. The Antonelli family. They have people everywhere. If we hire Renzetti's mistress, our windows will be smashed by morning. Please, just leave." Alina stood there, stunned. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the label. Mistress, property. She walked out of the restaurant onto the busy street, seeing red. Damiano hadn't even done this. He hadn't made a call to block her. It was just his shadow. His mere existence in her life had tainted her, rendering her unemployable, unsafe, and dependent. She wasn't safe. She was trapped, and she was furious. It was Friday night, and the Emerald Room was packed. The bass of the music thumped against the walls, vibrating on the floorboards. The air was thick with smoke and expensive cologne. Damiano was holding court at his usual corner table, surrounded by his captains and a few politicians he owned. He was laughing at something his consigliere said, looking like the king of the world. He didn't look like a man who had slept in a twin bed the night before. He looked untouchable. Alina didn't wait for the bouncers. She didn't wait for permission. She cut through the dance floor, shoving past women in sequined dresses and men in suits. She marched right up to his table. Damiano saw her coming. His smile faded, replaced by a look of surprise and, dangerously, delight. He started to stand up. Alina didn't let him speak. She didn't let him charm her. With every ounce of frustration, humiliation, and desire she had suppressed for weeks, she swung her hand, crack. The slap was loud enough to be heard over the music. The entire club seemed to freeze. The music didn't stop, but the people did. Every eye turned to the VIP corner. The bodyguards tensed, hands reaching for jackets where guns were hidden. Alina stood there, her chest heaving, her palms stinging. She glared at him, breathing hard. "You ruined everything," she choked out, her voice trembling with rage. "I can't breathe without you taking up all the air." Damiano's head had whipped to the side from the force of the blow. A red mark was already blooming on his cheek. Slowly, he turned back to face her. He didn't look angry. He didn't signal his men to drag her away. He smiled. It was a dark, possessive, terrifying smile. He reached up and touched his cheek, his eyes locking onto hers with a heat that could melt steel. "Are you done?" he asked, his voice low and amused. "No!" Alina shouted. "I hate you. I hate that you make me need you." "Good," Damiano growled. He moved so fast she didn't see it coming. He grabbed her waist, hauling her body against his, and before she could protest, he kissed her. This wasn't like the kiss in the office. That had been a question. This was an answer. He kissed her hard, claiming her in front of 300 people. He kissed her until her anger turned into a different kind of fire. Until her hands, which had been fists moments ago, opened and gripped his shirt. When he pulled back, Alina was dizzy. "Come with me," he commanded. He didn't wait for an answer. He took her hand and led her through the stunned crowd, past the bar, and to the private elevator in the back. The penthouse suite was soundproof. The noise of the club faded as soon as the heavy doors closed, replaced by the hum of the city and the thudding of Alina's own heart. Damiano didn't turn on the lights. The glow of the city skyline filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the room in shades of blue and silver. He led her to the center of the room and stopped. He didn't touch her immediately. He just looked at her, breathing heavily, the mark of her hand still visible on his face. "You slapped me," he said, sounding awestruck. "In front of my men. You deserved it," Alina whispered, though her anger was draining away, replaced by a terrified anticipation. "I know," he admitted. He reached out and cupped her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. His touch was reverent. "I am tired of fighting you. Alina. I am tired of pretending I don't want to burn the world down just to keep you warm." "Then don't," she breathed. He kissed her again, and this time, it was slow. It was a tasting. He backed her up until her legs hit the edge of the massive bed, and they tumbled onto the silk sheets together. The night became a blur of sensation. For Alina, who had spent her life protecting her body, guarding it like a vault, this was terrifying. But Damiano didn't take it. He worshipped. He undressed her slowly, his hands shaking slightly, as if he were unwrapping a priceless gift. He murmured to her in Italian, words she didn't understand but felt in her marrow. "Bellissima, mio cuore, sei la mia vita." Every touch was a question, and every gasp she gave was an answer. When skin finally met skin, the friction was electric. Alina tried to hold on to her control, to keep some part of herself locked away, but Damiano wouldn't let her. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice a ragged whisper against her neck. She opened her eyes. He was hovering over her, bracing his weight on his arms, his face open and vulnerable in the moonlight. "I am right here." He promised. "I have you." When he finally moved inside her, Alina shattered. It wasn't just physical. It was the breaking of a dam that had held back years of loneliness. She wrapped her legs around him, pulling him closer, needing to be as close to him as two people could possibly be. They moved together in a rhythm that felt ancient and inevitable. The passion was high, a desperate hunger that consumed them both, but there was a tenderness to it that made Alina's chest ache. He was careful with her, treating her fragile heart with more care than he treated his own life. When the end came, it was a white-hot release that left Alina gasping, clutching his shoulders, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. Damiano followed her seconds later, collapsing against her with a groan that sounded like a prayer. The silence afterward was heavy. Alina lay in the tangle of sheets, staring at the ceiling. Her body felt heavy, sated, but her mind was racing. She had done it. She had crossed the line. There was no going back to the way things were. A sob escaped her throat. Damiano, who had been drifting in the drowsy aftermath, stiffened instantly. He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "Alina? What is it? Did I hurt you?" She shook her head, burying her face in the pillow. No, you didn't hurt me." "Then why are you crying?" "Because I'm scared," she confessed, her voice muffled. "I'm scared because I feel safe, and every time I feel safe, something bad happens. I don't want to be owned. Damiano, I don't want to lose myself in you." Damiano shifted. He pulled her into his arms, tucking her head under his chin. He held her tightly, his hand stroking her hair. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He waited until her sobs subsided into sniffles. "You think this is ownership?" he asked quietly into the darkness. He took her hand and placed it over his heart. It was beating steady and strong against her palm. "You don't belong to me, Alina," he swore, his voice deep and solemn like a vow. "I don't want a prisoner. I want a partner. You don't belong to me." He kissed the top of her head. "But you belong with me. There is a difference. You are my equal, my conscience, my home." Alina lifted her head to look at him. His eyes were clear. "Stripped of all deception. Belong with me," she repeated, testing the words. "Yes, starting tonight. No more running. We fight the world together." Alina took a shaky breath. She looked at the man who had just unraveled her and put her back together. "Okay," she whispered. "Together." Damiano smiled, a genuine, soft smile that reached his eyes. "Get dressed," he said gently, brushing a kiss on her forehead. "I want to take you for a drive. There is a place by the river. It is quiet. We can talk properly. Away from the club." 20 minutes later, they were walking out of the service entrance of the club. The air was crisp and cold, a welcome relief after the heat of the penthouse. Damiano's black sedan was waiting at the curb. His driver, the kind one with the scar on his eyebrow who had tried to give Alina a ride earlier, was standing by the rear door, holding it open. "Good evening. Boss, Miss Ventura," the driver said with a polite nod. "Good evening. Marco," Damiano said, his hand resting protectively on the small of Alina's back. "Take us to the river road." "Yes, sir." Alina slid into the back seat. The leather was cool. She felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. She had made a choice. She was terrified. Yes, but she wasn't alone. Damiano moved to get in beside her. He had one foot inside the car when the world exploded. It wasn't a sound. It was a force. A concussive wave that knocked the breath out of Alina's lungs before her brain could even register the noise. Glass shattered. Metal screamed. Alina was thrown sideways against the far door. Her ears were ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. "Damiano!" she screamed, scrambling up. She looked out the open door. The front of the sedan was a twisted wreck. Another car, a heavy SUV, had rammed into them at full speed from the front, crushing the engine block. Damiano had been thrown backward onto the pavement by the impact of the door swinging. He was rolling, scrambling to his feet, shouting something she couldn't hear. But Marco... Alina froze in horror. The driver's side of the car was gone. Crushed inward, Marco was slumped over the steering wheel, motionless, blood dark and terribly spreading across the dashboard. Gunfire erupted, pop, pop, pop. Flashes of light from the SUV. Bullets sparked against the pavement near Damiano's feet. "Get down!" Damiano roared, his voice cutting through the ringing in her ears. He didn't run for cover. He dove into the car, on top of her. He shoved her down onto the floorboard, covering her body with his own, a human shield against the hail of bullets that began to tear through the windows above them. Alina squeezed her eyes shut, clutching his shirt, the smell of gunpowder and blood filling her nose. The peace was gone. The war had arrived. The silence of the countryside was louder than the gunfire had been. 3 days had passed since the ambush on the river road. 3 days since Marco, the driver with the scar and the polite demeanor, had bled out on the dashboard of the sedan. Damiano had dragged Alina from the wreckage, shielding her body with his own as his security detail returned fire. Turning the street into a war zone, they had survived, but something inside Damiano had fractured. He had not taken her back to the penthouse. He had not taken her to the villa. Instead, he had driven north, deep into the wooded hills of upstate New York, to a property that did not exist on any public record. It was a farmhouse, built of gray stone and timber, surrounded by 50 acres of overgrown orchards and dense forest. There were no guards visible, though Alina knew they were out there in the trees, watching every shadow inside the house. The air was cool and smelled of pine and wood smoke. Damiano had been in a cold, simmering rage since the attack. He spent hours on the encrypted phone in the study, his voice a low rumble of Italian commands that sounded like executions being ordered. But when he stepped out of that room, the rage vanished, replaced by a terrifying gentleness directed solely at her. Alina sat on the back porch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, watching him. Damiano was in the garden. The most feared man in New Jersey, the man who had shot 2 attackers with a steady hand while pulling her to safety, was currently on his knees in the dirt, weeding a bed of rosemary. He was wearing worn denim jeans and a simple gray t-shirt that stretched tight across his shoulders. There was a bandage on his forearm where a shard of glass had sliced him during the crash. He looked different here. The armor of the suits and the gelled hair was gone. The sun caught the silver threads in his dark hair, making him look less like a kingpin and more like a man simply trying to keep something alive. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag, and caught her watching him. The dark intensity in his eyes softened instantly. "You should be inside," he said, walking toward the porch. "The wind is picking up." "I am fine," Alina said. She let the blanket slip from her shoulders. "I am tired of being inside. I am tired of hiding." Damiano stopped at the foot of the steps. "We are not hiding. Alina. We are regrouping. It feels like hiding." He walked up the steps and sat beside her on the swing bench. The wood creaked under his weight. He didn't touch her immediately. He just sat close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "I grew up in a place like this," he said quietly, looking out at the orchard, before the city, before my father became the boss. My mother grew tomatoes. She used to make me weed the rows before breakfast. Alina looked at him. Surprised, she had assumed he was born in a penthouse. "You? Gardening?" she teased gently. Damiano huffed a laugh, a genuine sound that rumbled in his chest. "I hated it. I wanted to be playing stickball in the street. But now, there is something honest about dirt. It does not lie to you. If you treat it well, it grows. If you neglect it, it dies. People are more complicated." He turned to look at her. His gaze dropped to the bruises on her arm, fading marks from the car crash. His jaw tightened. "I failed you," he said, his voice rough. "I promised you safety, and I put you in the middle of a kill zone." Alina reached out and took his hand. His fingers were rough, stained with soil. "You saved my life. Damiano, you covered me. You took the glass from me. Marco died," he said flatly. "Because of a war you didn't start," Alina countered. She squeezed his hand. "You are not a monster. Damiano, I see you. I see the man who plants rosemary and worries about the wind. That is the man I am." She stopped. The word hung in the air, unsaid but heavy. Damiano looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "The man you are what?" Alina swallowed. She wasn't ready to say it. Not yet. The sky above them darkened. The wind that Damiano had warned about suddenly surged, whipping the trees into a frenzy. A crack of thunder shook the ground, and the heavens opened up. It wasn't a gentle shower. It was a deluge. The rain hammered against the porch roof, drowning out the world. "We should go in," Damiano said, standing up. But Alina didn't move. She watched the rain falling in sheets just inches from the porch steps. It looked cleansing. It looked like it could wash away the blood, the fear, the memories of the shattered glass. She stood up and walked to the edge of the stairs. "Alina," Damiano warned. She stepped off the porch, out into the storm. The water hit her like a shock, instantly soaking her sweater and hair. It was cold, freezing cold, but it made her feel alive. She turned her face up to the sky and laughed. It was a sound of release, of defiance against the death that had almost claimed them. "Alina!" Damiano shouted, half amused, half worried. "You will catch pneumonia." She spun around, hair plastered to her cheeks, clothes clinging to her skin. She looked wild and free. "Come out," she yelled over the roar of the rain. "You said you liked the dirt. What about the rain?" Damiano stood on the dry porch, watching her. He looked at his designer watch, looked at his dry clothes, and then looked at the woman laughing in the mud. He shook his head, a smile breaking through his stoic mask. He bounded down the steps. He didn't stop at the edge. He ran straight into the downpour, grabbing her by the waist and spinning her around. Alina shrieked, laughing as water sprayed everywhere. He was soaked in seconds, his t-shirt becoming a second skin, the bandage on his arm growing dark with water. "You are insane," he growled, but he was laughing too. He pulled her close, pressing her wet body against his. The laughter died in their throats as the contact sparked something hotter than the cold rain. Alina looked up at him, water dripping from her lashes. The adrenaline, the fear of the last few days, the isolation, it all focused into this single point of contact. Damiano looked down at her. His eyes were dark. dilated, hungry. "I could kill for you," he whispered, the rain washing the words against her lips. "I would burn the whole world down to keep you dry." Alina reached up, gripping his wet hair. "I don't want to be dry," she whispered fiercely. "I want to be with you. In the storm." She kissed him. It was desperate and slippery and perfect. They stumbled back, seeking shelter under the canvas canopy of the garden shed nearby, but they didn't make it inside. Damiano backed her against one of the thick wooden posts of the pergola, lifting her up. Alina wrapped her legs around his waist, burying her face in the crook of his neck, tasting rain and salt and skin. There was no fumbling, no hesitation. Their clothes were heavy barriers that were frantically pushed aside. When they joined, it was primal. The sound of the rain pounding on the canvas above them matched the rhythm of their bodies. It was a claiming, a desperate affirmation that they were alive, that they were here, that they belonged to each other. Damiano groaned her name, his forehead resting against hers, his hands gripping her hips as if he were afraid gravity would steal her away. Alina clung to him, feeling the strength of his back muscles under her hands, feeling the way he shuddered with every breath. Later, as the storm began to fade into a steady drizzle, they stood there, still entangled, breathless and drenched. Damiano brushed the wet hair from her face. He looked at her with a terrifying clarity. "I love you, Alina," he said. He didn't say it like a question. He said it like a fact, like gravity. Alina felt her heart stop, then restart with a frantic beat. She looked at the man who had saved her, the man who gardened, the man who killed to protect her. "I think I love you too," she admitted, her voice trembling. Damiano rested his forehead against hers. "Then marry me," he said. "For real this time. Not as a housekeeper, not as a cover. Be my wife. Be my partner." Alina pulled back to look at him. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear that she would run. She took a deep breath. "Yes," she said. Damiano let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. "But," Alina added, raising a finger, "one condition, anything," he swore. "No more secrets," she said firmly. "If I am your wife, I am your partner. That means I know the risks. I know the threats. You don't hide things from me to protect me. We share everything, even the ugly parts." Damiano hesitated. A shadow flickered behind his eyes, a reflex of a lifetime of secrecy. But he looked at her, soaked and shivering and resolute, and he nodded. "No more secrets," he promised. "Just us." The return to the city was a spectacle. Damiano didn't sneak back in. He drove a new car, an armored Phantom, right up to the front doors of his estate, and on Alina's finger, catching the light for everyone to see, was a diamond that could have bought the entire block she used to live on. It was an emerald-cut stone, vintage, set in platinum. It belonged to his grandmother. The announcement sent shockwaves through the organization. The staff at the villa stared at Alina with wide eyes, the servant girl who had become the queen. The captains muttered in hushed tones, but the loudest objection came from the top. Silvio, Damiano's advisor, was waiting in the library when they arrived. He looked pale. "You cannot do this, Damiano," Silvio hissed as soon as Alina had gone upstairs to change. "It is suicide. The Antonellis will see this as a weakness. A civilian wife is a target. She's not a civilian anymore," Damiano said coldly, pouring himself a drink. "She is a Renzetti, and she is not a weakness. She is the reason I am going to win this war." Silvio paced the room. "There are rumors, Damiano, about her background. People are digging. If they find something, let them dig," Damiano said. "She is an orphan. There is nothing to find." Silvio stopped. He pulled a folded newspaper from his jacket pocket. He placed it on the desk. "You should read this," Silvio said softly. "It comes out tomorrow morning, but the digital leak is already spreading." Damiano frowned. He picked up the paper. It was a trashy tabloid, the kind that printed lies for breakfast. But the headline made his blood freeze. "The Mafia Bride, Daughter of the Butcher." Damiano scanned the article. His grip on the paper tightened until the paper tore. Alina Ventura, the fiancée of crime boss Damiano Renzetti, is not the innocent orphan she claims to be. DNA tests and birth records uncovered by our sources confirm she is the biological daughter of Marco the Butcher Vitti, a feared enforcer for the Chicago outfit who vanished 20 years ago with millions in stolen family money. Damiano stared at the page. Vitti. He knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Vitti was a legend, a man who had betrayed his own code and disappeared. If Alina was his daughter, she wasn't just a civilian, she was royalty. And she was a liability of nuclear proportions. The Chicago families would want her head for her father's sins. She doesn't know, Silvio said quietly. Does she? Damiano looked up. No. She thinks her father was a mechanic who died in a wreck. You have to tell her. Silvio said, before she sees this. Damiano looked at the door to the hallway. He thought of Alina upstairs, finally feeling safe, finally trusting him. If he told her that her blood was tainted, that she was born into this life she despised, it would break her. And worse, someone inside his organization had leaked this. Only a handful of people could access those kinds of old records. There was a traitor close to him. If I tell her, she will panic, Damiano said, his voice low. She will run. And if she runs, the Chicago hitmen will find her. So you are going to lie to her? Silvio asked. You promised her no secrets. I am going to fix it, Damiano said, crumpling the paper. I will find the leak. I will bury this story, and I will protect her from the truth until it is safe. He threw the paper into the fireplace. He watched it burn. Burn all the copies, he ordered. Buy the publisher if you have to. She does not see this. The engagement party was meant to be a celebration, but the air in the Renzetti ballroom was thick with tension. 500 guests filled the hall. Senators, judges, and captains of industry mingled with men who had guns holstered under their tuxedos. Alina stood by Damiano's side, wearing a gown of midnight blue silk that hugged every curve. She looked regal. She looked happy. She kept touching the ring on her finger, smiling at him with a trust that made Damiano's stomach twist with guilt. He had managed to kill the story in the mainstream press, but whispers were like smoke. You couldn't catch them all. He saw the looks people were giving her. Not looks of admiration anymore, but looks of calculation. They were wondering if she had her father's temper. They were wondering where the stolen money was. Damiano kept his hand firmly on her waist, steering her away from anyone who looked like they might talk too much. Are you okay? Alina whispered, leaning into him. You feel tense, like wire. I am just watching the room. He lied. I thought we were done with the bodyguards tonight, she teased. I am always your bodyguard, he said, kissing her temple. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne. Damiano waved him away, but the waiter lingered. He looked nervous. Sir. A message, the waiter mumbled, pressing a folded napkin into Damiano's hand. Damiano stiffened. He unfolded the napkin. It was blank. He looked up, but the waiter was already disappearing into the crowd. Suddenly, Alina stiffened beside him. Damiano, she said, her voice awed. He turned. Alina was holding a phone. Not hers, someone else's. A woman in a red dress, one of the Antonelli wives, was standing in front of her, holding out a smartphone with a poisonous smile. I just thought you should know. Dear, the woman purred, it is so romantic, a Romeo and Juliet story. The daughter of the butcher and the son of the Renzettis. Alina was staring at the screen. It was the article, the one Damiano had burned. Alina, Damiano said, stepping forward, don't read that. It is garbage. Alina didn't look up. Her eyes were scanning the text, darting back and forth, her face drained of all color, turning the shade of old parchment. My father. She whispered. She looked up at the woman. My father was a mechanic. The woman laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound. Oh, honey, your father was Marco Vitti. He skinned men alive for the Chicago outfit. Everyone knows. That is why your fiancé picked you, isn't it? He wants the money your daddy stole. Get out, Damiano snarled at the woman. The woman smirked and walked away, leaving the grenade she had detonated. Alina stood frozen. She looked at the phone, then slowly turned her head to look at Damiano. She was searching his face. She was looking for a surprise. She was looking for shock. She didn't find it. She saw the guilt. She saw the recognition. You knew? She whispered. Damiano reached for her hand. "Alina, listen to me." "You knew," she repeated, her voice gaining volume. She stepped back, pulling her hand away as if he had burned her. "I found out 2 days ago," Damiano pleaded, his voice low and desperate. "I was trying to protect you. I was trying to find out who leaked it before." "You promised," Alina cried out. The sound cut through the chatter of the party. Heads turned. "You promised no more secrets," she shouted, tears filling her eyes. "I told you that was the only way I would marry you. And you stood there. You let me wear this ring. You let me play the happy bride while everyone in this room was laughing at me? Alina, please." "Not here," Damiano warned, stepping closer. "Don't touch me," Alina yelled. She looked around the room. She saw the faces of the guests, the pity, the amusement, the judgment. She felt the weight of her history, the blood she didn't know she carried, crushing her. "I am just a pawn to you, aren't I?" she said, her voice breaking. "A strategic acquisition. Did you think that if you married the butcher's daughter, you would get his territory? Or his money? No!" Damiano roared, losing his composure. "I love you. You don't love me." Alina spat. "You love the game, and I am done playing." She reached for her left hand. Damiano's eyes widened in horror. "Alina, don't—" She ripped the emerald ring off her finger. It was tight, it hurt, but she yanked it free. She threw it. The heavy platinum ring hit Damiano in the chest, bounced off his tuxedo lapel, and clattered loudly onto the marble floor. "I would rather be a servant," she said, her voice trembling with devastation. "At least a servant gets paid to be lied to." She turned and ran. "Alina!" Damiano shouted. He started to chase her, but Silvio stepped in his path, grabbing his arm. "Boss, you cannot leave. The senator is watching. If you chase her now, you look weak." Damiano shoved Silvio aside with enough force to send the man stumbling. "I don't care." He ran to the balcony doors, bursting out into the night air. But the driveway was empty. The taillights of a taxi were fading into the distance. She was gone, and for the first time in his life, Damiano Renzetti felt true fear. Not the fear of death, but the fear of total, absolute silence. The taxi ride back to the crumbling edge of the city felt like a funeral procession. Alina stared out the window, watching the glamorous skyline of the financial district fade into the jagged, shadowed silhouettes of the tenements. She had no coat, only the midnight blue silk gown that was now stained with rain and humiliation. Her ring finger felt phantom light, the skin there, pale and indented where the platinum band had sat only an hour ago. She had left everything behind, the diamonds, the promises, the man who looked at her as if she were the sun, while simultaneously hiding the fact that she was born from darkness. When the taxi pulled up to her building, Alina paid the driver with the emergency cash she kept tucked in her bra, an old habit from a life spent waiting for the floor to drop out. She stood on the sidewalk, shivering. The front door of the building was propped open with a brick. The lock busted again. It was fitting. She had tried to escape this life, tried to pretend she could be the lady of the manor, but gravity always pulled her back to the gutter. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs, her heels clicking ominously in the quiet stairwell. When she reached her apartment door, her breath hitched. It wasn't just unlocked, it was hanging off its hinges. The heavy steel deadbolt Damiano had installed, the first gift he had ever given her, had been drilled out. Alina pushed the door open. If the first break-in had been a warning, this was an eviction. The apartment had been gutted. The drywall was smashed in, exposing the wooden laths like broken ribs. Her clothes were shredded, the fabric covered in bleach. Her mattress was overturned and gutted. In the center of the room, stabbed into the drywall with a rusted switchblade, was a piece of paper. Alina walked over to it, her legs trembling. The handwriting was jagged, angry. "You should have stayed a servant." Alina stared at the words. The malice radiating from them made her stomach turn. This wasn't just vandalism. This was hatred. It was a message that she had overstepped, that she had dared to rise above her station, and now she was being put back in her place. She realized then, with a cold, sinking dread, that walking away from Damiano had not saved her. She was no longer just Alina Ventura, the invisible waitress. She was the runaway bride of the Renzetti Dawn and the daughter of the butcher. She was a target painted in neon. A heavy footfall crunched on the broken glass behind her. Alina spun around, grabbing a shard of a broken ceramic lamp from the floor as a weapon. Damiano stood in the doorway. He was still wearing his tuxedo, but the jacket was gone. His shirt sleeves rolled up and his tie hanging loose. He was breathing hard, sweat glistening on his forehead. He looked frantic. His usual composure shattered. When he saw her holding the shard of ceramic, his face crumpled with relief, followed immediately by a surge of dark, protective rage as he took in the destruction of the room. "Put it down, Alina," he said, his voice rough. "Get out," she warned, backing up until she hit the ruined wall. "I am not leaving you here," Damiano said, stepping over the debris. "Look at this place. They know you are alone. You are exposed. I am exposed because of you," she shouted, the ceramic shaking in her hand. "This is your world, Damiano. These are your enemies. They destroyed my home because I was stupid enough to wear your ring. It is not safe," he pleaded, ignoring her anger. "Come back to the villa. We can argue. You can scream at me. You can hate me. But you will do it behind reinforced walls where no one can touch you." Alina laughed, a sound that lacked all humor. "Safe? You lied to me, Damiano. You looked me in the eye and promised no secrets, all while knowing my father was a monster. You let me walk into a room full of wolves without telling me I had blood on my hands. I was trying to fix it," Damiano roared, closing the distance between them. He stopped just out of reach, his hands raised in surrender. "I wanted to bury the truth so it could never hurt you. You didn't do it for me," Alina said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You did it for you. You wanted the fantasy. You wanted a clean slate." She threw the ceramic shard at his feet. It shattered against the toe of his expensive shoe. "You wanted a wife, Damiano. Someone to wear the dress and sit at the head of the table and make you feel like a good man. But you didn't want a woman. You don't want a partner who asks questions and has a past. You just wanted a prop." Damiano flinched as if she had struck him physically. "That is not true." "Then leave," she said, pointing to the door. "If you respect me at all, leave. I will find my own way. I am not your property." Damiano stared at her, his jaw working. He looked at the threatening note on the wall, then back at her defiant face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black burner phone. He set it on the only piece of furniture still standing, a wobbly kitchen stool. "Number 1 is my private line," he said, his voice hollow. "Number 2 is the safe house. If you need anything at all." He turned and walked out. Alina waited until his footsteps faded down the stairs before she sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands. She didn't cry. She was too angry to cry. 2 hours later, her personal phone, which she had miraculously found intact under a pile of clothes, buzzed. It was a blocked number. Alina stared at it. Her instincts, sharpened by a lifetime of avoiding predatory men and creditors, screamed at her not to answer. But she thought of the note on the wall. "You should have stayed a servant." She swiped the screen. "Hello?" "Alina Ventura," a voice said. It was smooth, oily, and terrifyingly calm. "This is Luca Antonelli." Alina went rigid. "The enemy, the man trying to kill Damiano. What do you want?" she asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I want to apologize for the mess in your apartment," Luca said. "My boys can be overzealous. It was just a message. We wanted to make sure you understood your position. I understand that you are a coward who breaks people's furniture," Alina snapped. Luca laughed softly. "You have fire, just like your father. Listen to me, Alina. We don't want you. You are a civilian. You are a distraction. We want Renzetti. I am not with him anymore," Alina said. "I left him." "We know," Luca replied. "That is why we are calling. You are vulnerable. Renzetti cannot protect you now, but we can offer you a deal." "A deal?" "Give us his location," Luca said. "Tell us where he sleeps when he is not at the fortress. Help us end this war, and we will give you a ticket to anywhere in the world. New identity, cash. You can disappear. You can finally be free of this life." Alina gripped the phone. It was the offer she had dreamed of for years. Freedom, escape, no debts, no danger. but the price was Damiano's blood. She looked at the ruined apartment. She looked at the burner phone Damiano had left. "When?" she asked. "Tonight," Lucas said. "Meet me at the docks, Pier 42, midnight. Come alone. And Alina, if you tell him, we will finish what we started with your apartment. Only next time. You will be inside. I will be there," Alina said. She hung up. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was crystal clear. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small digital voice recorder she used for taking notes during catering shifts. She wasn't a servant anymore, and she wasn't a victim. She was Marco Vitti's daughter, and if the Antonellis wanted a war, she was going to give them one. Pier 42 was a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and shadows. The smell of salt water and diesel hung heavy in the air. Alina walked toward the black SUV parked at the end of the pier, her heels echoing on the concrete. The window rolled down. Luca Antonelli sat in the back seat, smoking a thin cigar. He was younger than she expected, with a cruel, handsome face. "Get in," he said. "I will stand," Alina replied, crossing her arms. Luca smirked. "Smart girl. Do you have the information? I know where he is going to be tomorrow night," Alina lied smoothly. "There is a charity gala. The Renzetti Foundation. He's planning to use the service corridors to move secure assets during the speech. He will be separated from his main guard detail for 10 minutes. Luca's eyes lit up. "Service corridors? Which ones?" "The north wing, leading to the kitchen." Luca tapped his cigar ash out the window. "And why are you telling me this? You loved him, didn't you?" Alina looked him in the eye. The recorder taped to her stomach beneath her shirt was warm against her skin. "He lied to me about my father," she said, channeling every ounce of her real pain into the performance. "He used me. I want him to hurt." Luca smiled, a wolfish grin. "Consider it done? And your payment?" "I want cash," Alina said, "and a plane ticket to Paris. Tonight." Luca nodded to his driver. "Get her the bag." As the driver reached for a duffel bag, Alina stepped back. "I want to see the ticket first." The driver hesitated. Luca frowned. Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. Police. It was a bluff. Alina had timed her arrival with the nightly patrol she knew passed by here, but it was enough to spook them. "We went," Luca snapped. "We will find you with the money after the job is done. Don't try to run." "Alina?" The SUV peeled away, tires screeching. Alina stood alone on the pier. She reached under her shirt and clicked stop on the recorder. She had his voice. She had the conspiracy. She had the proof. But more importantly, she knew exactly where and when they were going to strike. They weren't going to wait for her intel. She had just confirmed the location they were already scouting. The gala was a trap. The Emerald Room was closed to the public, but the lights were on. Damiano was drinking alone at the bar, nursing a whiskey he hadn't touched in an hour. He looked up when the service door opened. A figure in a hooded sweatshirt and dark glasses walked in. It took him a moment to realize it was Alina. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over. "Alina?" She pulled off the hood and the glasses. She looked exhausted, pale, but her eyes were burning with a fierce determination. "They are going to hit the gala," she said without preamble. Damiano stared at her. "What?" "The Antonellis. They contacted me. They wanted me to sell you out." Damiano's face darkened. "Did they hurt you?" "No. I played along." Alina walked up to the bar and slammed the digital recorder down on the counter. "I recorded it. They are planning an ambush during the speeches. They think you will be in the kitchen corridors moving assets." Damiano looked at the recorder, then at her. "Why? Why did you come here? You should be running." Alina looked at him. "I am angry at you, Damiano. I am furious. But I am not a murderer. And I am not going to let them win just because you are an idiot who doesn't know how to tell the truth." Damiano reached out, his hand hovering near her face. "Alina." "Don't," she said, stepping back. "We are not fixed, but we have a problem. They think I am working with them. If I don't show up at the gala, they will know it is a trap. You are not going to the gala," Damiano said instantly. "It is a kill zone. I have to," Alina argued. "I have to be the bait if I am there, acting like a guest. They will think their plan is working. They will commit to the attack, and that is when you trap them." "No," Damiano said, slamming his hand on the bar. Absolutely not. I will not use you as bait. You don't have a choice, Alina shouted back. If you don't end this now, they will keep coming. They will burn down every home I ever have. I am already in this war. Damiano, let me help you end it. Damiano looked at her. He saw the steel in her spine. She wasn't asking for permission. He exhaled slowly. Okay, but you wear a wire. You have 3 guards on you at all times, and the second the shooting starts, you hit the floor. The Renzetti Foundation Gala was the event of the season. The ballroom was a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and forced smiles. Alina moved through the crowd in a silver gown that shimmered like liquid mercury. She held a glass of champagne she didn't drink. She smiled at the people who had whispered about her the night before. Damiano stood on the stage, giving a speech about community outreach. He looked calm, authoritative, but his eyes never left Alina. She tapped the small earpiece hidden in her hair. I see them, she whispered. 2 waiters by the north exit. They are checking their watches. Copy? Damiano's voice came back, tense and sharp in her ear. My men are in position. Get to the safe zone. Alina, now. Alina turned to move toward the side exit, but a hand grabbed her arm. It wasn't a waiter. It was Luca Antonelli, dressed in a stolen staff uniform. Going somewhere, sweetheart, he whispered, pressing something hard and metallic against her ribs. Alina froze. The gun was small, easily hidden, but lethal. You said kitchen corridors, Luca hissed, but Renzetti is on stage. You lied to me. Plans changed, Alina stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Walk, Luca commanded. To the kitchen. We will wait for him there, and if you make a sound, I will put a bullet in your spine. He forced her through the crowd. Alina couldn't speak into the mic without him noticing. She tried to make eye contact with Damiano on stage. Damiano paused mid-sentence. He saw Luca. He saw the way he was holding Alina. He didn't finish the speech. He dropped the microphone. Security, Damiano roared. Kitchen, now! He jumped off the stage, abandoning all protocol, sprinting through the crowd. Luca cursed. He shoved Alina forward, through the swinging doors into the kitchen corridors. It's a bust. Kill him, Luca screamed into his radio. The kitchen exploded into chaos. Antonelli gunmen popped out from pantries and freezers. Damiano's men breached the rear doors. The narrow, stainless steel hallway became a deafening echo chamber of gunfire. Luca dragged Alina behind a metal prep table, using her as a human shield. Damiano skidded around the corner, his gun drawn. He saw Alina. He saw the gun pressed to her head. Drop it, Damiano shouted, his face a mask of terror. Back off, Renzetti, Luca yelled, or the girl dies. Alina looked at Damiano. She saw him lower his gun slightly. He was going to surrender. He was going to let them kill him to save her. No, she whispered. She slammed her elbow backward, driving it into Luca's stomach. It wasn't a knockout blow, but it shocked him enough that his grip loosened. Alina dropped to the floor. Damiano fired. The bullet struck Luca in the shoulder, spinning him around, but Luca, falling, fired blindly in return. Damiano didn't duck. He lunged forward, throwing himself over Alina as a second gunman emerged from the freezer. 2 shots rang out. Damiano jerked violently. He collapsed on top of her, his weight heavy and warm. Damiano! Alina screamed. More gunfire erupted as Damiano's security team flooded the room, neutralizing the threats, but Alina didn't see them. She only saw the blood spreading rapidly across the white dress shirt of the man lying on top of her. She rolled him over. He was pale, his eyes fluttering. The bullet had hit him in the side, just below the ribs. It was bleeding badly. Damiano, look at me, Alina commanded, her voice cracking. She ripped the hem of her silver dress, tearing the expensive fabric into strips. She pressed the silk against the wound, pushing down hard. Damiano groaned, his eyes focusing on her face. Did I get him? He wheezed. You idiot! Alina sobbed, pressing harder as his blood coated her hands. You absolute idiot! You jumped in front of a gun! I promised, he whispered, his teeth stained with red. I promised. Safety. Alina leaned over him, her tears falling onto his face, mixing with the sweat and grime. You promised to be my partner, she shouted at him. Partners don't die for each other. Do you hear me? You don't get to die and leave me with this mess. Damiano tried to smile, but it was weak, I love you. Alina, he rasped. I love you too. You stubborn jerk, she cried, leaning down to kiss his forehead, desperate to keep him conscious. I would rather be your wife than anyone's pawn. But you have to live. You have to live to marry me. Medic, she screamed at the guard standing over them. Help him. Damiano's eyes drifted shut. His hand, which had been gripping hers, went slack. No, 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 Alina chanted, pumping pressure onto the wound. Stay with me. Starting tonight, remember? Starting tonight. The world faded into a blur of shouting voices and flashing lights, but Alina refused to let go. She held on to him as if her will alone could stitch him back together. Her silver dress turned crimson. Her heart finally, fully, and terrifyingly belonging to the man bleeding out in her arms. The recovery room was sterile, white, and smelled of antiseptic. But to Alina Ventura, it was the most beautiful place on earth because the heart monitor next to the bed was beeping with a steady, rhythmic persistence. Damiano Renzetti was alive. The bullet had missed his major organs by a fraction of an inch. The doctors called it a miracle. Alina called it stubbornness. She sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, her hand resting lightly on his forearm, careful of the IV lines. She had not washed the blood from her silver dress until the nurses forced her to change into scrubs. She had refused to leave his side for 48 hours. When he finally opened his eyes, they were hazy with morphine, but they found her instantly. You are still here, he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel. I told you, Alina said, her voice thick with exhaustion. I am not going anywhere. Damiano tried to shift, wincing as pain shot through his side. The Antonellis? Handled. Alina lied softly. Just rest. But they were not handled. Not yet. 2 weeks later, Damiano was discharged. He did not go home to rest. He went to his office at the villa, leaning heavily on a cane, his face pale but his eyes burning with a cold, terrifying clarity. Alina sat in the corner of the room as he summoned his captains. She expected him to order a bloodbath. She expected him to burn the city down to avenge the attack. Instead, Damiano laid a file on the desk. I want the Antonelli accounts frozen, he said, his voice low and deadly. I want their shipping containers flagged for customs inspections at every port on the eastern seaboard. I want the loans on their properties called in by the banks we control. His captains looked confused. Boss, they shot you. We should hit them. We should take them out. No, Damiano said, looking at Alina. He held her gaze. It was a silent communication, a promise kept. She had told him she wasn't a murderer. She had told him she wouldn't be part of a slaughter. Death is too easy, Damiano continued, turning back to his men. If we kill them, their sons will rise up in 10 years to kill us. It is a cycle. I am ending the cycle. We will not touch their families. We will not touch their children. We will simply take everything they own until they are begging for change on the street. We will leave them alive, but we will leave them with nothing. The room was silent. It was a crueler punishment in a way. To strip proud men of their power and leave them to watch their empire crumble to dust. And the leak? One of the captains asked. The one who gave them the location? Damiano's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Leave us, Damiano ordered the captains, except for Silvio. The room cleared. Silvio, the consigliere, the man who had stood by Damiano's side for a decade, stood alone in the center of the Persian rug. He looked calm, but his hands were twitching slightly at his sides. Damiano picked up a tablet from his desk. He slid it across the mahogany surface. It was a transfer record, a massive payment from an offshore account linked to the Antonellis, deposited into a shell company owned by Silvio's wife. Why? Damiano asked simply. Silvio stared at the tablet. He didn't deny it. He didn't beg. She was a weakness, Silvio said, gesturing to Alina. You were losing your edge. Damiano. You were risking the family for a girl. I tried to warn you. I tried to leak the story about her father to scare her off, but you wouldn't listen. I did what I had to do to save the organization. You tried to have me killed, Damiano said. I tried to remove the distraction, Silvio shouted. Damiano stood up. He winced, his hand going to his bandaged side, but he stood tall. She's not a distraction, Silvio. She's the only reason I am still alive. She saved me in that kitchen while you were counting your blood money." Damiano walked around the desk. He stopped in front of his oldest friend. "You are out," Damiano said. Silvio blinked. "You are going to kill me?" "No," Damiano said. "That would be a waste of a bullet. You are exiled. You have 1 hour to leave the city. If I see you again, if I hear your name, if you ever try to contact anyone in this life, then I will kill you." Silvio looked at Damiano, then at Alina. He saw the united front they presented, the king and the queen, unbreakable. He realized then that he hadn't just betrayed his boss, he had bet against the wrong kind of power. Silvio turned and walked out the door. Damiano let out a long breath and leaned back against the desk, his strength fading. Alina was there in an instant, sliding her arm around his waist to support him. "You did good," she whispered. Damiano rested his forehead against hers. "I am done with the blood. Alina," he said, "I will keep the territory. I will keep the power. But I am done with the cruelty. I want to build something that doesn't rot." 6 months later, the Renzetti Foundation was no longer just a tax shelter for illicit funds. It was a bustling hub of activity in the center of the city. Alina walked through the lobby, checking the clipboards of the volunteers. They were opening a new youth center in the district where she used to live, the district where landlords like Mr. Russo used to reign with terror. Now, those buildings are being renovated. Families were being given grants. The money that had once flowed through the veins of the drug trade was now pumping life back into the community it had nearly destroyed. Alina was tired, but it was good. It was the exhaustion of purpose, not survival. She felt a presence behind her before she heard him. Damiano wrapped his arms around her waist, burying his face in her neck. He smelled of fresh rain and expensive wool. "You're working too hard," he murmured against her skin. "I am making up for lost time," she replied, leaning back into him. "And someone has to make sure you are actually donating 20% of the casino profits." Damiano chuckled. He kissed the soft spot behind her ear. "Come home," he said. "I have paperwork. It can wait. I need you." There was a different note in his voice. Not the commanding tone of the boss, but the vulnerable request of the man. Alina turned in his arms. He looked healthy again. The scar on his side had healed into a jagged white line, a permanent reminder of the night he had chosen her over himself. "Okay," she said. "Let's go home." The villa garden was unrecognizable. When they arrived, Alina realized why he had wanted her to come home early. The entire garden had been transformed. Thousands of small white lights were strung through the branches of the old oak trees. The path was lined with candles, flickering softly in the twilight. Damiano led her to the center of the garden, to the stone bench where they had sat months ago, back when they were hiding from the world. He turned to her. He took both her hands in his. "The last time I gave you a ring," Damiano said, in his voice serious. "It was a strategy. I did it to protect you. I did it because I was arrogant enough to think I could own you without giving you myself in return." He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box, but he didn't open it immediately. He dropped to one knee in the grass. Alina's breath caught in her throat. "Alina," he said, looking up at her, "you taught me that loyalty isn't about fear. It is about choice. You chose me when I had nothing to offer but danger. You saved my life. You saved my soul." He opened the box. Inside sat a ring. It was not the massive, heavy emerald from before. It was a simple, elegant diamond band, beautiful, but understated, real. "No more lies," Damiano whispered. "No more secrets. No more hiding who we are. Just us, partners, equals." He took a shaky breath. "Will you marry me, Alina? Not as a Renzetti, but as Damiano." Alina looked down at him. She thought of the frightened girl who had spilled wine on a mobster. She thought of the woman who had slapped him in a club. She thought of the blood on her hands in the kitchen. She wasn't afraid anymore. "Yes," she whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Yes, I will marry you." Damiano stood up and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He kissed her, and it wasn't the kiss of a conqueror. It was the kiss of a man coming home. The wedding was small. There were no senators, no business partners, no press. It was held in the small chapel on the estate grounds. The pews were filled with the people who actually mattered. The staff from the villa treated Alina like family, the volunteers from the foundation, a few of Damiano's most loyal men who had stood by him during the purge. Alina wore white, not a grand ball gown, but a sleek, silk slip dress that moved like water around her body. She walked down the aisle alone, head held high, meeting Damiano at the altar not as a possession to be handed over, but as a woman stepping into her power. Damiano wore a black tuxedo, but he wasn't looking at the priest. He was looking at her. He had tears in his eyes, unashamed. When they exchanged vows, they didn't use the traditional script. "I promise to stand in front of you when the world is dangerous," Damiano vowed, his voice thick with emotion, "and to stand beside you when it is peaceful." "I promise to keep your secrets," Alina vowed back, holding his hands tightly, "and to never let you lose yourself in the dark again." When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the small crowd was louder than any stadium. The reception was a dinner in the garden, filled with laughter, wine, and music. But as the moon rose high, Damiano leaned over and whispered in Alina's ear, "I want to be alone with my wife." They slipped away, running hand in hand back to the main house, laughing like teenagers. The door to the master bedroom clicked shut, locking out the world. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the fireplace. Damiano turned to her. The laughter faded, replaced by a heavy, reverent silence. He reached out and touched her face. "Mrs. Renzetti," he whispered, testing the name. Alina smiled. She reached up and undid his tie, pulling it loose. "Damiano." He kissed her. It started slowly, a gentle exploration of lips and breath, but the fire that had always been between them, the fire that had started with a spilled glass of wine and a slap, was still there, burning brighter than ever. He lifted her up, carrying her to the bed. Their lovemaking that night was different. It wasn't fueled by fear or desperation. It was a celebration. It was slow and deliberate. Damiano took his time, worshipping every inch of her skin, his hands mapping the curves of her body as if he were memorizing a sacred text. Alina guided him, her hands tracing the jagged scar on his ribs, kissing the skin there, reclaiming the wound as part of their story. "You are beautiful." He groaned against her neck, his body moving over hers with a powerful, rhythmic grace. Alina opened up to him completely. She let down every wall, every defense. She met his passion with her own, wrapping her legs around him, pulling him deeper, anchoring him to her. It was raw and honest. It was the physical manifestation of their vows, two broken people fitting their jagged edges together until they made something whole. When the climax came, it left them both breathless and trembling, clinging to each other in the tangled sheets, their hearts beating in a synchronized rhythm that echoed in the quiet room. Sunrise painted the sky in streaks of violet and gold. Alina stood on the balcony of the villa, wearing one of Damiano's white dress shirts. The morning air was cool, but she didn't feel the cold. She looked out over the estate. It was peaceful. The war was over. The garden was blooming. She felt Damiano step up behind her. He wrapped his strong arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, looking out at the horizon with her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. Alina placed her hands over his. "I am thinking about that first night," she said. "When I told you I wasn't a servant," Damiano tightened his hold on her. "You were never a servant." "Alina," he whispered, his voice rumbling against her back. "Even then, you were the only person brave enough to wake me up. You were my answer." Alina turned in his arms. She looked up at his face, the face of a man who had walked through hell to find her. She reached up and kissed him softly, the morning light catching the diamond on her finger. She smiled, a true, radiant smile that promised a future. "And now I am your wife," she whispered, "starting tonight." Damiano smiled back, the demons in his eyes finally silenced. "Starting forever," he corrected. He kissed her again as the sun broke over the horizon, illuminating the new day. the new life, and the love that had survived the darkness to find the light. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Alina and Damiano. I would love to hear from you. Please comment down below and tell me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this series, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for the Mafia Romance Stories channel so you never miss an episode. Share your thoughts on the ending in the comments. Did Damiano redeem himself? I can't wait to read your opinions in English.